Hello Blood Bowl fans and welcome back to Race Rundowns. Today is going to be a difficult one because I'm going to be looking at a team that nobody really knows what to do with. And to be honest, I don't think there is a particular strategy for Bretonnians. There are quite a few. So we're going to have a look at Bretonnians. I'm going to talk about them in general as much as possible. And if anything is theoretical, out of all the teams, it's going to be this one, because there just hasn't been enough testing with this team from enough people. So I only have my own experience and some experience from people that I know who play Bretonnians quite well to go off, and that's it. So first of all, let's see what Cyanide has to say about the Bretonnian team. Their strengths: they have low-priced linemen. Yes, they do. It means you can have a bench, so long as they don't die. This team is comfortable with brawling. Oh, no, it's not. Oh, do not listen to that. That's not true. No, if you're going to brawl with a Bretonnian team, you're going to have a line of dead linemen. So this isn't strictly true. I think what they mean is that they are capable of causing damage. But no, most teams you don't go toe-to-toe as Bretonnians. No, no, no. And blitzers can handle the game almost by themselves. To put it another way, blitzers are pretty much the only useful piece in the team, in terms of gameplay. Every piece has its use, but in terms of actually winning strategy, blitzers are the only ones that are really useful. Weaknesses: the blitzers, they're expensive and necessary. Yes. I think on both accounts, yes. A bit frail when playing against bashy teams. Then what do you mean they're comfortable with brawling? Oh, okay. Yes, they are very frail, especially the linemen, when playing against bashy teams. Though, to be honest, even against non-bashy teams, I'm not very likely to constantly fight them as Bretonnians. And they're not made for agility. It's an interesting team where they're not really made for anything. That's the problem. They can't bash and they can't edge well. They have to kind of do a combination of both, and positioning is absolutely key on Bretonnians. To be honest, if you are a beginner and you really want a challenge and you want to learn exactly how to position and exactly, learn what happens when you make mistakes, play Bretonnians. You'll learn quickly, but it will be a very frustrating lesson, I can tell you that much. So, in the fair land of Bretonnia, arrogant Bretonnian nobles and their yeomen are questing for an alternative grail, the Bloodweiser trophy. Convinced of their own skill, the young knights fill out their team with lineman levy, drafted from the many local and incompetent all-peasant teams. Yeah, so to put it in simple terms, it's like King Arthur, but crap. Let's have a look at the team then. So, what are we going to call you boys? We're going to call you... Yes. The Superfluous Bunch. Okay. And I can't not make Welsh Dragons. It's the only team where I have this option to make Welsh flag with a dragon, so I'm always going to make the Welsh Dragons. Okay, and yeah, where are we? We are here. Yes. Okay, so talking about Bretonnians then, there are only 3 positionals. You've got a lineman, who has fend, which is actually quite useful, though generally speaking his job is to stand in the way. That's all a lineman does. And you are better off standing him on something, even though he can die. If he doesn't die, he's going to be in the way even on the floor, and the thing that punched him isn't going to move, generally speaking. So you've got this weird situation where you have to put the lineman on an opposition piece, but you don't want to because he's likely to die. So it's a bit of a strange team. You've got the blitzer, who is the key piece. I will have a look at them in a second. And this is mostly the agility part of the team. And you have the blocker, that is supposed to be the strength part of the team, but they need to develop before they're particularly useful. Let's have a look at the pieces as they are then, starting with the peasants. Peasants have fairly average stats, to be honest. They're not awful. They just have 2 slightly nerfed stats. They have average movement, average strength, slightly below average agility, and slightly below average armor value. So don't give them the ball, and pray every time they get punched. They only have general access, but to be honest, you're not really looking to develop them. And a lot of people say, you know, you buy this piece to be a dirty player and foul, foul, foul. Don't get me wrong, if you can make that work for you, that's legitimate strategy. But fouling is kind of counter to what Bretonnians have to do, which is going to be a somewhat unpopular thing to say, though I think it's true. Bretonnians mostly need to hold a line, and they need to stop things from breaking through. If they can foul, then by all means do, but if you're against a team that basically the armor value is too strong to really get value out of the foul, it's kind of risky unless you have a deep bench. If you are playing a fouling game, you're more likely to maintain a bench. If you're playing a Bretonnian game where they're actually trying to win, then chances are you're not going to actually manage to keep a bench because pieces are going to die in the process of winning. So it's an interesting toss-up between what to do with a Bretonnian team, to be honest. So I see two strategies for alignment, basically. You either go dirty player route, and you foul until they're gone. Eventually they will die, because Bretonnians die. The other option is that you give them things like block and dodge to make fend even more useful. Dodge on a double, of course. Give them block, tackle, etc. to make this fend more useful, or even wrestle. So every time somebody takes a block against one of these pieces, they're frustrated when the piece doesn't die. That's how I personally use peasants, at least. And you need as few of them as possible on the team because they are your weak link, so keep that in mind as well. Though, having said that, a good friend of mine, Urban Zorro, he plays an all-peasant team, basically, and he makes them work, and they really work. And he actually manages to do a combination of both, where he does stand in the way and forces the opponent to really struggle to break through him, and he also fouls everything to death. So he's managed to use both strategies at once, though it requires a pretty much entire peasant team, which is not really ideal, especially for ball handling. Moving on to the second piece in the team then, the blocker, or yeoman, also known as. And as you can see, they are basically just squires. They start a wrestle, which is kind of useful, and they have general and strength access, so they can take the mighty blow, they can take the guard, they can take all these things that you need, and they should all look like this, big, grumpy men. They have average skills across the board. They're completely average. They're completely average. Movement value 6, strength 3, agility 3, armor value 8. As average as a human lineman, but they have wrestle. When you're building these pieces, mostly you want a mighty blow piece, you want a couple of guard pieces, and you want one piece who can sack the ball. That's kind of their role, so a elf hunter, if you like, with tackle, strip ball, things like this. I really hope you can't hear that, but I'm sure you can. There's somebody doing some drilling upstairs. Best time for them to do it. Thank you, guys. And the last piece in the team is the blitzer. He is the key. He is the star in the Bretonnian team, if there is such a thing. The knight. They have the knight's helmet with the trophy and candles on top, and they have the biggest shoulder pads in the game. And they're still not as good as they should be. Though they do have 3 lots of general access. They have general agility and passing on a normal roll, and all 3 are relatively useful. And they start with 3 skills: block, catch, and dauntless. And I think dauntless is one that we haven't really seen yet. When you take a block against a piece that is stronger, we have seen it actually on the Troll Slayer, but I'll say it again anyway. When you take a block against a piece that is stronger, you roll a dice, and if the dice roll is good, you can equal the strength of your opposition piece. The one thing they're missing is dodge, but you can get that on the first level up. And to be honest, when blitzers are level 3, level 4, they can be quite good pieces, but they're the only piece in the team that are particularly useful. They have above average movement allowance and then average across the board other than that. So they move slightly more than most pieces, but they have average strength, agility, and armor value. And they're the only pieces in the team that should really be handling the ball. Though, because they have block, you also want to get them into the fight. So it's a bit of a strange one. You use one as a blitzer basically, and use 2 as ball carrier, or passer and receiver, as you have that option with catch. In terms of the team build then. So, you can actually go Oops, sorry. You can actually go all positionals, so if we do that, it's not necessarily the ideal option, but it is an option. So there's our team of 11. And with all positionals, you can buy 2 rerolls. As you can see, the reroll is quite expensive. However, because the reroll is quite expensive, you're more likely to want to buy some extra rerolls to start off with, in which case we drop 2 blockers and we take 2 more linemen. It's a slightly safer build with the extra reroll, because you're going to want to get the reroll later on anyway, and to be honest, you're probably going to lose pieces in the early games anyway, so it's better to lose linemen wherever possible as opposed to losing blockers. As the game goes on then, you buy an apothecary first, and then you buy your extra 2 blockers when they've leveled up a bit. Or you buy them when you can afford them, it's up to you. This way it's actually easier to make a deeper bench than if you go for all positionals. All positionals is kind of putting all your eggs in one basket, and there's a chance that you're going to take some injuries. That's the basic team build. There's not really much else to say. In terms of what to do with the pieces though, let's just make them a standard team after a few games. Assuming that we have the apothecary, assuming that we have everything that we need in the team. Yeah, sorry, need to fire a reroll. Oops. Oi. There we go. I'm being a bit confused by the drilling upstairs, sorry. So, in terms of what we have with this team then, basically, all of your blitzers want dodge. I usually make one as a passing piece that has pass, that has accurate, that can get the ball around the pitch a little bit, but I always take dodge first unless I have a double. If I have a double, then probably mighty blow. The blockers all want guard, though it's probably better off to have at least one mighty blow piece early on as well. And the linemen, it doesn't really matter, to be honest, but you can give them either the dirty player route if you're going to foul a lot. If you're going to foul a lot, you need a bench though. Or you can give them the block route, which is safer, with things like wrestle as well, which is safer, instead of block, I mean. I actually usually take wrestle over block on linemen because I prefer to have a really frustrating team of Bretonnians where every time you're in a fight with them, there's a good chance you're ending up on the floor or you're ending up in a position you don't want to be, fighting them. That's the kind of thing I tend to build in a Bretonnian team. The basic strategy is hold key pieces with linemen, especially if, for example, the opposition has claw, then put a lineman on it because it counteracts the claw, and the rest of your pieces are susceptible to it. The blockers basically hold off the slightly weaker pieces, the pieces that it's going to take a couple of blocks in order to do some damage to you, and the blitzers stay out of the way, they play with the ball, they take blitzes, and they position to do damage to the opposition player, so they're the kind of hunters in the team. You can have a blocker hunter as well, though they can't move as far and they don't start with block, so it's slightly less useful. In terms of development then, let's have a look at the one team that I have. I only have the one Bretonnian team, I think. It is the team in G-Man, the Real Welsh Dragons. You may have seen them. As you can see, Bretonnians die. And I have no lineman left. Though to be honest, the lone lineman has the equal job of a regular lineman, at least the way I play Bretonnians, because the linemen are just there to stand in the way. They very rarely even roll dice. So I'm quite happy with a lone lineman, to be honest. It's not a big deal for me. I did originally go for the all-positional lineup, and I lost positionals as I went along, so it wasn't the best start. From experience, I would say probably take the 2 blockers and the extra reroll, because it's more useful than the setup with all positionals. Linemen are actually fine in this team. In terms of development though, just so you can see, I do have a Mighty Blow guard piece. The rest of them were going to start with guard, the one rolled doubles, so he has dodge. I've gone dodge on all of my blitzers. Cledwin is going to get pass next, and the other guys are going to take some... We'll have a sidestep piece, we'll probably have a strip ball piece, and we'll give this piece dodge and see where he goes from there. He is nickeled as well, so I wouldn't be too surprised if he eventually dies. And in terms of the linemen, I don't usually let them develop anyway, so it's not really a big deal. If they develop for me, I tend to replace them. And I am saving up for an extra team reroll in this team, so long as another positional doesn't get killed. In terms of what Cyanide have done with the team, I'm actually kind of interested. Let's have a look. I know. So, Bretonnians. Let's see what they've got. Let's have a look at their highly developed team. So we have a team here. They only have 12 people, so obviously they don't play a fouling game necessarily either. And as you can see, they've all been given block, one's been given kick, and one is a dirty player. But they've gone for the safe route as well. Linemen are actually more useful than just stomping on things on the ground. So the people who tell you that all linemen are good for is stomping, consider telling them that there's other uses for them. And we've got... all the blitzers have doubles, so that's not really good to look at. We've gone guard, mighty blow here, and we're using... oh, this is a weird team. Forget this team, it doesn't make any sense. And this team, does it make more sense? Not really. Well, anyway, in terms of the team build, I would go all dodge, one sidestepper, one strip ball, one with throw and accurate, and one will be a designated catcher, maybe with diving catch as well. So we'll have a stripper, a piece that's annoying that can handle the ball, a piece that can throw the ball, and a piece that is decent for catching. On the blockers, you have a hunter-killer that will have maybe mighty blow, guard, tackle, and piling on, but not necessarily. That's one more thing you can do with a blitzer, actually, because they have jump up. If you do roll a double, you can make one a piling on piece, though you don't really want a blitzer on the floor, he will get fouled. I'd also have a blocker who starts with... two blockers who start with guard, and after that they get the kill skills, and one that maybe starts with tackle and becomes an elf hunter. And the linemen, like I say, it doesn't really matter what they have, though I'm probably taking block or wrestle on all of them as a first skill. Maybe one kick. Okay. And in terms of opposition strategy, the general strategy for Bretonnians is not to get too involved in a fight, because if you get too involved in a fight you are going to lose most attritional battles, but to basically cause as much frustration as possible. So standing off, kind of doing an elf screen but with Bretonnians, and keeping the linemen at the front as much as possible, while also locking up the key pieces if absolutely necessary. Though to be honest, if your opposition can only have one blitz on you, and the one blitz happens to be a lineman, then they can't really move the team. So they're actually not that bad defensively so long as you set them up that way. On offense, basically you want to hold a pretty flat line and try and work your blitzers around. It's quite difficult. If you are in a TV deficit situation, then you can take a Griff, who can really help the team, or you can take Zug, who can also really help the team because you can actually bash a little bit. So if I was playing against an agility team, there's a good chance that I'm taking Zug, and if I was playing against a bash team, there's a good chance I'm taking Griff, but of course you need the gold to manage that. Though Bretonnians tend to die a lot, so it's quite easy to stay low on TV. I mean, this Bretonnian team has had quite a lot of matches now, and they're still at 1-1-20. Let's have a look at how many matches they've actually had. No, it's not as many as I thought, actually, but we got 9 matches, and we're still at 1-1-20, so that's pretty low, considering. And with the lineman, it's 1-1-7-0. 1-2-7-0, sorry, so it doesn't go much higher, really. Anyway, in terms of facing opposition specifically, Humans and Bretonnians is kind of a weird matchup, because both teams have the same basic issue. They can't really do anything as experts, but they can kind of do both at the same time. So both teams are looking to pick on the weaker pieces, and Bretonnians are slightly disadvantaged with that because they have linemen that only have armor value 7, whereas the humans are an all armor value 8 team. So if you're going for a punch up with humans, you're probably going to lose. Though if you can pick off the catches with your blitzers, and if you can keep the thrower out of the game, and even if you can knock out a couple of linemen and avoid the ogre as much as possible, or just put one peasant on the ogre, though the ogre has mighty blow, so just keep that in mind. If you can basically pick off the catches, pick off the thrower, and stand away from the pieces that can do damage, you may be able to survive, and you may even be able to outscore them. Though both teams want to play a similar strategy against each other, so it's a difficult matchup. Against orcs, you've got to kind of accept that at the end of the match there's probably going to be a dead peasant or two, or at least an injured peasant or two. And there's a good chance you're either going to lose especially if it's a developed orc team, there's a good chance you're even going to lose one of your positionals. So keep that in mind. You have a slight agility advantage over orcs though, so it's kind of a case of keeping away from the orcs as much as possible and running around them. Though if the orc coach is good, then they'll kind of create a flat line and force you through a gap, and it's pretty hard to make a gap against orcs as Bretonnians. The best thing to do is try and take advantage of a flank, and if the orcs counter that, then try and get back around them. Though it's very much a dance with orcs. And when on defense, try and avoid the fight as much as possible. Just stand one step back, make them blitz you, and if they can only blitz a lineman, then they're not going very far very fast. Dwarves are a similar story to orcs. The only problem with the dwarves is they can counteract your blitz's dodge, which can be a real problem. And also, the guard in your blockers becomes kind of useless because you don't want to be lined up against a line of dwarves, because the line of dwarves will destroy your team. So it's pretty much the same thing as against orcs. Try and take a flank. If the dwarves manage to chase you down, then go to the other flank, because you have the movement over them and you can actually pass the ball a little bit. And when you're on defense, try and stay one square away from them. Against Skaven, it's very tempting to get into a punch-up. The problem is, though, Skaven can outmaneuver you, and their ability to fight isn't much different to your ability to fight. And you both have quite a lot of armor 7 pieces. If you can pick off the gutter runners, if you can pick off a couple of linemen, if you can pick off the thrower, then you're going to have a pretty good day against rats. If you can knock out a storm vermin, even better. So you're better off picking on the armor 7 with your blitzers. So it's basically a case of using a couple of blitzers or a blocker and a blitzer to try and wipe out one piece at a time. Keep the ball in your own half as long as possible, using a combination of blitzers and blockers, and use the lineman to lock up the 2 storm vermin and to try and lock up, for example, the thrower, anything that can cause you some problems. The rats are going to be doing the same thing though. They're going to be putting linemen on you as much as possible, and trying to get around you with the other pieces. So you need to try and put yourself into a position where you always have a good one-die block against everything, because you have the block advantage. And on defense, you need to make sure you have a blitzer or 2 in the back, just for when the gutter runner does get through, you can finally chase them down and murder the frickin' thing. That's basically it for Skaven. Elves are a similar story. High elves are going to try and pass around you and over you, of course, so you need to keep pieces in the back ready to deal with that, and to deal with the catches that do inevitably get through. The high elves are better at punching than you, so keep that in mind. It's tempting to have a punch-up with elves, but the high elves will actually out-punch you as Bretonnians, because they have better armor value. They have less block, but generally speaking their attrition is slightly stronger than yours, so just keep that in mind. You don't really want to get into a slog with high elves. Again, try and focus down the pieces that are weaker, the catches, the thrower. The thrower isn't weaker, but I mean it's a piece that's useful to lock up. And avoid the blitz as much as possible, and even avoid the linemen as much as possible, because the high elves are actually going to be trying to outpunch you. Dark elves is a similar story. There's slightly more armor value 7, but not much more, and they can still outbash you. And they also potentially have an assassin who can stab the hell out of your peasants, so keep your peasants away from the assassin if they have one. Try and lock up the witch as much as possible. Try and lock up the runner if you can, and try and avoid the blitzers unless you have your own blitzers doubled up against them. Though with 4 and 4 that's not very likely. So try and focus on the armor value 7, try and avoid the blitzers. And in terms of defense, keep some blitzers in the back, ready to deal with the dark elves that do break through, and basically keep trying to surround them. That's the main thing against dark elves as Bretonnians. Just keep them in kind of a centralized area where you can pick off a piece or 2, and where they have to kind of force their way through, but they can't get very far forward. And similar story with the high elves, actually. We're not talking about mirrors. In terms of chaos, in early TV, it's the one team you actually have a slight advantage over, because you have more skills. You can out-agility them, and you can slightly outstand them, because they don't have any block. Though, it's not a good idea to get into a fight with chaos in general, so don't do that. Same kind of idea as with orcs and dwarves. Try and stand off as much as possible. Try and get around them when you're on offense. The Wood Elves are the only real team that you can pick on, because everybody can pick on Wood Elves, I've said that before. But the Wood Elves can also outrun you quite impressively, so keep that in mind. But with the guard you have, you can actually cause quite a lot of problems for Wood Elves, because they can't punch through. If you can really use your blockers well, in combination with blitzers, the Wood Elves are going to struggle. Or even blockers in combination with linemen, and keeping a couple of blitzers back to deal with the ball carrier that gets through eventually. If they have a tree, stay off the tree, because the tree will cause you problems. Though mostly try and focus down any piece that's on its own, and keep some pieces in reserve for when something gets through. And try and survive the onslaught of the War Dancers, because the War Dancers will be trying to cause you problems, trying to knock out your linemen especially. Lizards is probably the worst possible matchup for Bretonnians. They just don't have an answer for Lizardmen. Lizardmen have way too much strength to deal with, so as Bretonnians you kind of want to stand in the way, but if you're standing in the way of lizards, lizards are going to kill you if you're trying to stand on them, so you have to stand off them. But they have the agility with the skinks, so it's actually not so hard to score as lizards against Bretonnians. You have to kind of focus down the skinks as much as possible. I actually have a match, Bretonnians against lizards, where I did quite well playing against them. You can find it in my library. I managed to hold them to a draw, and the key to the game was basically knocking out skinks whenever I could, and that was the only thing I was doing. I was also using linemen to stand in the way of pieces that were kind of frustrating and out of position. So if a Saurus is slightly out of position, then try and keep a lineman on him, because the Saurus isn't going to be able to reposition easily. Though generally speaking, you don't want to fight with lizards, you want to stand off them as much as possible. And when you're on attack, it's also just as hard, because it's very difficult to break through lizardmen. You have to choose a side and hope that you manage to break through one or two of the lizards. When you do have a lot of guard on your team, it can be helpful, but the lizardmen also have guard generally speaking, so it counteracts each other. Though if you do have an abundance of guard, there's a chance that you can knock down a Saurus or two and break through. Though when you're playing against lizards, to be honest, you've got to hope that you are down TV and you can induce Griff, because not Griff, Zug, because Zug can actually help you in this matchup. That extra mighty blow can really make a difference. Norse is an interesting matchup for Bretonnians, because you both have the exact same problem. You need to stand in the way, and you need to stand on each other, but you're both too weak to stand up to a fight. You have a slight advantage over Norse in that they have mostly armor value 7 apart from 3 pieces. They have an advantage over you though because they have so much block. If it's an early match, then trying to focus down a piece or two, especially runners, especially throwers if they have one, and especially berserkers, get rid of them as quickly as possible, then you can hopefully get rid of enough pieces to have a number advantage and you can keep them held. Though just keep in mind they're trying to do the exact same thing to you. So try and force them into a situation where they have to commit a lot of pieces to a piece of yours that is not very valuable, and try and pick off the pieces that are left on their own. A Norse team, generally speaking, is looking to kill, so you can actually use that to your advantage a little bit and keep the ball away from them, while also doing some damage of your own when you're fighting. And when you're on offense, it's kind of the same idea. They're trying to stand out of the way, so punch a hole, punch it hard, and get as many pieces through as possible so they have to chase you, as opposed to trying to hold the line against you. Undead is also a difficult matchup for Bretonnians, especially the mummies, because the mummies can cause you all kinds of hurt. The whites can also cause a lot of problems if they can get onto your Bretonnians, if they can get onto your blockers, if they can keep you locked up. The ghoul is the only piece that you can outpunch, so if you can, get rid of that. If they happen to have skeletons as well, target their skeletons. Though the zombies are almost equally as frustrating as your Bretonnians, as your peasants, I should say. And everything else is kind of a danger to you. So when playing against undead, it's kind of the same as playing dwarves, as playing orcs, as playing all of these bashy teams. Try and stand off them as much as possible, stop them from coming forward. It's the same kind of story. And when you're trying to make a line, try and make a line through zombies, because zombies that are on the ground, they can't reposition very easily. If you can split up the mummies, then do so. though it's easier said than done, of course, and a good undead coach won't let them split up. Necromantic team is kind of similar, but the wolves are a little bit scarier, so you want to put peasants on the wolves if you can, just so the claw is completely counteracted. You want to get rid of the ghouls if they have ghouls, and you want to avoid the flesh golems as much as possible, though the flesh golems at least don't have mighty blow at first, so you can maybe keep them on the ground by taking 1-die blocks with block, though it is a risky strategy. Mostly when you're on offense, make sure that you've got the ball and you try and keep flesh golems and zombies in a position where they cannot maneuver very quickly, and do your best to stave off the fight with the wolves and the whites. Yep. Then moving on to Nurgle. Nurgle are kind of a nightmare team because they have the ability to completely outbash you, they can stop you from bashing them, and they can stop you from passing. And you kind of suck at all these things anyway, so when playing against Nurgle, you're going to have a really rough day as Bretonnians. Their main thing is to try and get rid of the rotters, because the rotters have decay, which means they're not going to come back if you do manage to get rid of them. Also though, keep an eye on the pestigors, make sure that you can get rid of them if you have the opportunity, and avoid the warriors and Beast of Nurgle as much as possible. On defense, same kind of idea, stand one back, make a solid screen, and stop anything from getting through. When I'm playing as Bretonnians, you can actually see in my video when I'm defending, I think it's the one thing I do quite well as Bretonnians, I managed to make a screen that is 3 lines deep, which means that even if something does break through, they're not going very far forward. So if you do want to see Bretonnian defense, then check out some of the videos in this playlist. Against Khemri, you have a slight chance because you can maybe hurt some skeletons, though the skeletons are probably coming back, though the Blitzrals and the Tomb Guards can cause you a lot of problems, of course. Also, as always with Khemri, they have a problem picking up the ball, so you can kind of use that to your advantage as much as possible. Whenever something has the ball, make sure that you focus down that ball carrier, make sure the ball is on the ground again. Just basically forcing them to pick up, forcing them to roll as many dice as possible. That's the best option against Khemri as any team. Though as Bretonnians especially, you really want to pick on the skeletons wherever you can, try and get rid of a couple of them. Though they're going to be doing the same to your alignments, just keep that in mind. And Chaos Dwarves. Chaos Dwarves is also one of the worst matchups for Bretonnians because they have all of the counters to the things that you can even kind of do. There's nothing as Bretonnians you can really do, but Chaos Dwarves can counteract anything that you can do even a little bit. So the Chaos Dwarves can cause you all kinds of problems if you're trying to outblock them. The Bull Centaurs can outrun you, the Minotaur can completely destroy you, and even the Hobgoblins are equally as good as the majority of your pieces. So keep that in mind, that they do have armor value 7, so they are the pieces to pick on if there are quite a few of them in the team. Though, generally speaking, same idea, because the Chaos Dwarves are so slow, the Chaos Dwarves themselves. Make sure that you're screening off against them. Try and keep the Bull Centaurs stuck between a couple of pieces. Avoid the Minotaur at all costs, and punch a Hobgoblin when you can. When you are on offense, it's really quite difficult. All you can really do is focus down one dwarf at a time and try and position it so the dwarves have to come and chase after you. So go to one flank, when all the dwarves come that way, go to the other flank, but you've still got the Bull Centaur and the Hobgoblins to deal with, so it's really not easy against the Chaos Dwarf team. In terms of the series, I think this has been my worst video so far, and there's a reason. Bretonnians suck. I'm not going to lie, they're a really bad team. They're not really a team that you can be overly competitive with. So it's a case of doing the best you can in a bad situation with Bretonnians. The main skill, or the main key thing of a Bretonnian team, is learning how to deal with mistakes. That's what I find Bretonnians are really useful for. When you make a mistake, you get heavily punished as a Bretonnian team. And a simple mistake can cost you a game. So, in terms of that, even when you're watching the best coaches play as Bretonnians, they're going to really struggle to play. So keep that in mind, and if you do want to give the Bretonnians a go, then by all means do. It'll teach you a hell of a lot about positioning, I'll tell you that for a fact. Anyway, thanks for watching this video, I appreciate you taking the time. The next one will hopefully be a bit more informative because there's more to talk about. The Bretonnian team are not really a team that you can play competitively, so I can't give too much advice, though hopefully at least some of this has been helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Bye bye for now.